February 1917, World War I rages. The Tsar is away at the Eastern Front, having taken personal command of the army. Meanwhile, demonstrations and protests against food shortages, bread prices, mismanagement of the war, poor working conditions, and more boil over in the capital, Petrograd, aka St. Petersburg. The fighting and protesting continue for a few days before parts of the military join in with the crowd and arrest the Tsar's ministers. The provisional government, made up of moderate Duma ministers, takes over. Tsar Nicholas II abdicates, but rather than pass the throne on to his only son Alexei, who is ill with hemophilia, he gives it to his younger brother Mikhail. Mikhail in turn meets with the provisional government and says, "Thanks, but no thanks." He abdicates the next day. All across the land, the people rejoice at the end of the Tsarist autocracy. But Russia's involvement in the unpopular war and food shortages continue. Bread prices rise, and the people's call for land reform is left unaddressed. A constituent assembly made up of representatives from around the nation is planned to decide the permanent government. April. The Germans, Russia's wartime enemy, help Lenin to return from exile in an attempt to further weaken the chaotic country. Lenin, having missed out on the February Revolution, denounces all sides but his, the Bolshevik Party. In his famous April Theses, he calls for the overthrowing of the provisional government, with instead all power to the Soviets. He tries to rile up the masses once again to incite another spontaneous coup. This doesn't work. Lenin pushes on. He demands that Russia leave the war immediately. This position instantly wins him troop support, a military connection he will use later. Throughout the summer, the Bolsheviks continue to poke and prod to set off mass demonstrations and remove the provisional government. In June, the Minister of War, Alexander Kerensky, orders the new offensive in the war. Major fail. Lenin acts fast to try to agitate the masses. The Bolsheviks, along with the soldiers and sailors of Kronstadt, attempt a coup with the July Putsch. They fail. Kerensky responds by arresting the guilty Bolsheviks, except for Lenin, who manages to escape and hide out in Finland. Kerensky is promoted to prime minister, replacing Prince Lvov, whose 4 months as prime minister turned his hair completely white. The country is in turmoil. Discontent and disillusionment abound, with failures on the front, famines at home, chaos in the factories and the street, and increasing class polarization. In August, there is the chaotic Kornilov affair, in which General Kornilov attempts to crush the Petrograd Soviet and overthrow the provisional government. The provisional government turns to the Petrograd Soviet, including the Bolsheviks, for help stopping him. Result: Kornilov fails and support for the Bolsheviks increases, while support of Kerensky and the now obviously weak provisional government decreases. End of summer. The Bolsheviks are gaining popularity and win a majority in the Petrograd Soviet, which is a powerful council of workers and soldiers with whom the provisional government shares power. From his hiding spot in Finland, Lenin sees a golden opportunity for the Bolsheviks' revolution before the Constituent Assembly's November elections. Lenin's followers hide out at the Smolny Institute, a former school for girls. October 24th. Lenin, back in the capital, disguises himself as a drunk with a toothache and heads to the Smolny Institute. Bolshevik troops creep out in the night and begin occupying strategic points in the capital. Bridges, railway stations, the army headquarters. No shots are fired. October 25th. By morning, Kerensky has fled the Winter Palace, the only government building not yet occupied. By this time, the palace is only protected by Junkers, who are local military academy cadets. The Bolsheviks position the cruiser Aurora outside the palace. No one wants to fire on the other. Finally, at 2 a.m. on October 26th, with little or no violence, the revolutionaries break into the palace and arrest the remaining ministers. They are taken to prison cells in the Peter and Paul fortress. Kerensky never returns. A pretty low-key anticlimactic event, more of a coup than a revolution. Afterwards, the Second Congress of Soviets makes a decree for land, which officially socializes all land for redistribution to peasant communes. A new provisional government is established, the Soviet People's Commissars, SPC. Lenin is chairman, and all the members are Bolshevik. They still plan to attend the Constituent Assembly's November election. A decree for peace is declared, and Lenin gets to work ending Russia's involvement in the war. In November, the elections for members of the Constituent Assembly are held. But when the Bolsheviks receive a mere 23% of the votes, they declare one of the opposition parties, the Cadets, illegal and demand the Assembly voluntarily give up its authority. The Assembly refuses, but does not challenge the Bolsheviks. Once the Assembly adjourns, the Bolsheviks declare it dissolved. The Third Congress of Soviets replaces the Assembly. This group removes the word provisional from the description of the SPC and thereby makes Lenin and the Bolsheviks the permanent rulers of the country. And then there were 3 years of civil war.